Like, here's the thing: if something like this does exist, um, I think a lot of countries would be disinclined to even start a war.
We could use some help, and then all of a sudden you've got ninjas from all around the world, coming to help. And
One of the things that made ninjas so fearsome, and why they had kind of the upper hand against, say, like the samurai, was because they built this sort of mystique of like they're magical and they come out of nowhere and they just disappear.
anytime they issued a statement on something,
Mm-hmm.
like, here's what we just did, and this is why, and like I felt like there's a Batman right there.
Enable program deep sea diving. Loading crossing line. Loading PC roster. Initializing season 6 of Kitchen Sink microscopy.
Gonna be a drunk December.
Yeah,
Nah, what's different?
exactly.
Okay, everybody, welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy with your hosts, Casey Rochford and Eric Rosenblatt. And you are the subscriber, I hope. If you're not, subscribe now. Do it.
Yep. And as previously mentioned, I'm Eric Rosenblatt. And yeah, Casey and I, we write our own music. And at the end of every episode, usually there's one of our songs. Might be new, might be old. It could be one you've heard before, but it'll be one of ours more than likely. So there'll be one at the end of this episode. So stick around for a piece of that song. All right, Casey, what do you want to talk about today?
Dreams. Watch my dreams. Um,
We
well, a
already covered
specific,
lucid dreaming.
yeah, a specific dream in particular that I had, I guess, yesterday. Um, with everything going on in Ukraine and everything, um, possibly spilling over here into Germany in the next 5 years, and talks of nuclear war and all this stuff. I don't know, like with the world devolving into these militaristic crises and the ever looming threat of World War III in various corners of the world cropping up, the thought comes to me like, what better force to stop the spread of evil than ninjas? Like, like, why not create like a worldwide militia of ninjas? Like, kind of
Yeah.
based off of the ninjutsu philosophy. I mean, like, the ninjas totally like went up against the samurais and all these empires in ancient Japan and stuff, and or dynasties, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, to be specific. Um, and they had great success because they have some really good ideas about um, combat and avoiding combat
Mhm.
and de-escalation and all these things that honestly like militaries really don't even bother with anymore.
That's
Like
true. Well, now, in a lot of cases, ninjas kind of served as like mercenaries,
mhm.
soldiers of fortune, basically.
Well, that's kind of
Um,
what I'm thinking. Like,
and so they didn't really follow any particular leader, just whoever paid them, in general. But I know I get where you're going at, and I mean maybe it doesn't necessarily have to specifically be ninjas, but maybe something similar.
yeah,
I mean, you
the philosophy, the
remember
philosophy.
that bumper sticker that I made that said like real ninjas use lasers?
Yeah.
Because, and that's the thing, like people have this kind of notion in their head that, oh, ninjas, you would only use the antiquated old, throwing stars and swords and sticks and stuff like that, whatever. No, I mean, a modern day ninja would use night vision and all whatever technology is at their disposal. They'd probably have guns on them and stuff, and hand grenades, or who knows, incendiary devices and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and but I mean, I do. I think it would be a good thing if there was some kind of global network of uh, independent, like an independent distributed militia, essentially, where everybody's a member of this and they all coordinate together. There's no leaders. That's where all this would fall apart. Is if there was a
Right.
leader, it has to be distributed for it to function correctly and not be corrupted.
Mhm.
But where it's like, hey, if something stupid happens, if some country or whoever is behaving badly, if they're doing bad stuff, then everybody, and this would not be, that's the thing, it wouldn't be nationalistic because it would be everybody from everywhere
Right.
who could be a part of this, and everybody would bring their own particular skill set, because in a militia situation you don't always not everybody has to be a fighter. You need engineers and technicians and people that are good at communication stuff and technology and whatnot, coordinating movements and all. I mean, medical stuff, that kind of thing. I mean, there's like countless
Yeah.
roles that could be filled in
Well,
this.
and coordination is the key word. Like it, uh, the structure of militaries as it stands now, like especially in the U.S., is all about like blind obedience.
Mm-hmm.
And like follow your orders, do what you're told to do because these few people at the top know better than everybody else, right?
Well, except for that one time with the Army of One thing.
And like that's a fatal like chink in the armor sort of thing. Like resting everything on like one decision maker or one branch of people that are making all the decisions for everybody else. They're not out in the front lines. They're not making these split second decisions, and they're not, most importantly, seeing what's actually happening, and like seeing who they're being told to kill, and all this stuff. Like, so like women, children, old people, schools, hospitals, churches are all getting like decimated, killed, blown up,
Yeah.
uh, cut off from power and water, and
Well,
like
exactly.
this is stupid. Like,
It totally is. War should always, if there's any kind of combat, it should always be sort of a defensive thing. That's the only one to me that can be justified.
mhm.
Preemptive strikes and offensive things, that is always wrong. Never, you can't justify that. And I mean, yeah, war does result in misery and
Well,
suffering for all.
so in this dream I had,
People at the top and
um,
people selling arms and things like that, then they make out like bandits, and
yeah.
they never is there a threat to their existence.
So in this dream I had, there was I don't know, like a general or something that came to me in my capacity as a ninja and tried to talk me into joining the military, and I'm just like sitting there drinking my beer and being like, well, I would be willing to help in this particular cause, whatever it was, but I have to let you know, I'm not going to follow orders. Like
Mhm.
I'm going to do what I feel is right in the moment, and and it kind of went from there, like to the point where I woke up from the dream. I was no longer dreaming, and I was just thinking about like what kind of a system would it be if you had like an actual military or militia or whatever that was kind of built off of this, not a philosophy of offense and strength, but and orders, of course, but more like right and wrong, um, de-escalation. Like it even got to the point where I was thinking like, of course there will need to be weapons, but they shouldn't be just like constantly carried around with you at all times. Like
Well,
there should be a you know a stockpile that's safeguarded, and if you come being like we need weapons, you have to convince the people who will unlock it that you actually need them. Like so
well,
you
have
gotta come to these points where like somebody's always checking to make sure you're not going rogue and
Well, and it could easily check itself as long as it isn't hierarchical in nature.
Mhm. That's what I'm
Somebody
talking about. Yeah.
starts acting the fool. Well, then everybody else in this organization, whatever it is, can easily squish that.
Hmm.
And yeah, you do need a certain amount of constant arms as a defensive kind of like, hey, maybe you might not want to try attacking us because we're already ready. Or in the moment, if something happens, you do need to be able to respond. But I mean, when it comes to a large scale thing, yeah, you never want to start like approach something that could be diplomatically resolved with rifles in hand.
Yeah.
You should
But
start with the diplomacy first and
like
then de-escalate.
on what scale are you talking about attack? Because if it were like a country, let's say Russia wanted to attack the ninja army, well there is no ninja army, but there is a ninja army. Like there's no central location, there's no bases,
No,
there's no
no leaders.
place where these ninjas are coming to punch a clock and work 8 hours a day.
Well,
And
and that's the thing that separates. That's the difference between a military and a militia, and that
yeah.
militias are not employees. It's like it's
Mhm.
not a 24/7. This is what you do for a living thing. It's kind of like being a volunteer firefighter. Like you just train and practice at putting out fires and all the things you need to do. You have your gear at the ready, and then when somebody calls you, like, "Oh my God, there's a fire," then you spring into action and you get together and put the fire out. That's that's how I think things ought to operate, honestly, and being distributed in nature too, globally distributed. You have the force of numbers that yeah, like you're saying, that you can't attack anybody because they might be your neighbor. They could be like in your capital city or something, just hiding, hanging out, part
Yeah.
of this group, and you'd never know until the time is right. Um,
Well, and the great part about that, like also going back to like the OG ninjas, they could easily infiltrate actual militaries, you know, and I mean not even just infiltrate, but be like already in the military and then hear about this and be like, I want to be in the ninja militia. And they just kind of quietly sign up for that and stay in the military. And, then if something goes wrong with the military, they they have a way to initiate controlling that and putting that fire out.
Well, and when it comes to like ninjas, were saboteurs a lot of the time, and so if
Mhm.
you're in those positions, if you say work in the military or in the government or for the police or whatever, you could totally sabotage any kind of operation without anybody knowing what's going on, especially
Yeah.
if there's more than one. If it's like, oh yeah, 5% of the U.S. military is part of this group. Well, they could do a hell of a lot of damage to whatever the U.S. military is trying to do
Yep.
just by throwing a monkey wrench in things, like unscrewing some bolts on equipment and whatnot, contaminating fuel sources or whatever, making everybody get food poisoning, so everybody's puking and pooping all the time, and like kind of hard to fight a war when that's going on. I mean, there's countless little things you could do, even just like unplugging a wire on something, an indicator light or something like that. Maybe I guess not putting, disabling the explosives on munitions would be another thing you could do too. Just little stuff that makes it impossible to actually engage in warfare.
Yeah.
So and that's what I'm saying about like you don't necessarily have to start by fighting. Now, there could come a time, sure, where you do have to take up arms and get together and fight, just like when there's a big huge fire, like yeah, you need all the hands you can get because this
Yeah.
fire's out of control. And so that will come up at some point. But then again, maybe it won't.
Right.
If
And
something like, here's the thing, if something like this does exist, um, I think a lot of countries would be disinclined to even start a war because
right.
they would know that there's a bunch of hidden sneaky people all over the place and we don't know who they are,
Yeah.
and so
And
maybe
if
it's just not worth it.
well, and if it were like an A-team style situation where, like a government like Ukraine could be like, hey, we're getting beat up on pretty bad here, and like we're totally not the bad guy, like
Mm-hmm.
we could use some help, and then all of a sudden you've got ninjas from all around the world, coming to help, and the great thing is like when you don't have like a centralized authority,
Mm-hmm.
you have the beginner mindset, and I think a lot of this is actually like Asian philosophy, Sun Tzu stuff,
Mm-hmm.
where like the experts have very few ideas, but the beginners, anything's possible.
Yeah.
Their mind is open to anything. So when you have like a goal, like, oh, we need to stop this evil army from advancing on this poor little country, like the experts of the army are like, well, we have nuclear weapons and we have jets and missiles, and but then the ninjas on the ground might think more surgical, well,
Yeah.
a couple of us could get in here and like take this out and take that out, and you
That actually, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, you we have seen that to some extent.
mhm,
There have been saboteurs. A lot of the um, destruction that you see inside of Russia, especially early on, where stuff caught fire or whatever, it was people on the inside doing that, like destroying rail or blowing up like a fuel depot or something, and
yep,
that that really hampers a military's ability to do their work, especially since one of the benefits of this kind of thing, because that, going back to ninjas, like one of the things that made ninjas so fearsome, and why they had kind of the upper hand against, say, like the samurai, was because they built this sort of mystique of like they're magical and they come out of nowhere and they just disappear. When
mhm,
it's a lot of like smoke and mirrors, but people were like, they were genuinely terrified, because they could come out of nowhere, and
yeah,
maybe they're demons, who knows, and they played off of that, off of the superstitions and things like that.
yep, yep,
um and so you could easily do that too, where you command your soldiers to go into battle and they're like, whoa, no, because there's some kind of monster out there picking us off. It's like a predator out in the jungle. Fuck no.
exactly. I
And yeah, I mean, but let's see. I totally, this has got my juices flowing, because I do think that
Whoa
that
now.
would, yeah. Well, I'm thinking about organizations like Anonymous, and it's like nobody, they haven't been shut down even after they've done all kinds of crazy things. Like they do these like cyber attacks on shitty people, basically, and they pretty much only go after shitty people.
Yeah,
And it's a bunch of people all over the world. You don't know who they are. They're all using encrypted communications methods, and it's kind of, under the radar. You can't
yeah,
see what's going on, and they'll have a coordinated attack on something. Um,
mhm.
and that's relatively small, but imagine if we had, I don't know, millions of
Well,
people
the
across
great
the
thing
world.
about that is you have no idea how big it actually is because
That's
it is
true.
anonymous. Like I've always loved that organization. Like it, anytime they issued a statement on something,
Mm-hmm.
like here's what we just did and this is why, and like I felt like there's a Batman right there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, totally. And that's what we need. And I mean, maybe a system like that could potentially make incorrect decisions. But in general, when you have a mass of people like that that don't have a hierarchical structure, you're going to have at least a decision that is popular. Whereas when you're talking systems like, say, the US military and the government or something, or Russia or whatever, there's a handful of people deciding what the majority is going to do. And you kind of have to do it. Um, and
Yeah.
and so it's like, okay, well, the odds of two or three people making, like, coming together and making a stupid decision are much more high than 2 or 3 million people.
Hmm. Well, and here's the other thing is the transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Like the military isn't even transparent with their own people.
No,
You know, you've got all these levels of security, right?
everything's
And
compartmentalized. Yeah.
yeah, if you can't trust your soldiers on the front line,
Mm-hmm.
then why have them? Like, why not just go do it yourself, asshole? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like it really should be that. Yeah, and I know why they don't do this because people do have a sense of right and wrong, and they
Yeah.
know that there's more of the soldiers than there are of the brass. You
Yeah.
know, so if they knew what they were doing and why they were doing it, they probably wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a situation like a ninja militia, then if you just kept it transparent, like everybody talked with each other within this organization and said, you know, what's going on? Like, what are your thoughts on it? What should we do? Should we do anything? You know, and they can like have conversations about it and make decisions collectively, you know?
Yeah, and communication, of course, is the important thing, and that's the thing that I think would be one of the greater challenges. Because
Yeah,
you'd almost need like a mesh network. You can't have like a Facebook group where
right.
people are talking about it. It has. There's a few social media style mesh network systems that are distributed. Uh, Diaspora is one that comes to mind, where there is no server. Basically, you're
Mm,
part of the server, kinda. It's a little bit like cryptocurrency,
mm,
that like all the users kind of form the server by their
interesting.
existence, and you can like come and go, and if something is taken out, it can reroute around, and like you can still communicate. um that's kind of the best way to be able to do something like that. I think, at least currently.
Yeah. Yeah, that is important to have something like that because of course, um, you know, drawing attention to yourself as an organization like that, in at least in the early days, would invite being squashed by the governments. Um,
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, in the you couldn't even have, I mean, you could certainly have something open source that anybody could download and stuff. It could be hosted all over the place. Let's say whatever it is, some kind of software, right? That's used. Um, but it would almost have to be built through sneakernet. That is, people physically handing each other, sharing flash drives, and like back in the day, we used to do that. You'd have a floppy with some stuff on it, and you hand it to your buddy, and they'd make a copy of it, and then now you'd
uh,
take that copy and hand it to your other buddy, like, oh man, check out these games or these demos or whatever.
yeah,
And that's how things traveled, and it could these days it could travel remarkably fast, shockingly fast.
that's how
Uh,
the anarchist cookbook went around back in the day, right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was a book for sale, but there were alternative and enhanced versions that were swapped around from on BBSs and stuff, and text files. Oh man, actually, that's something I'd recommend to everybody. There's textfiles.com, I think it is. They have It's a repository of all the old shit from like the 80s and 90s from BBSs, all
Oh,
these text files with stories and all kind. It's really, man, it's a a deep rabbit hole that it'll suck you in. Um, but yeah, it has to be kind of a grassroots thing. And I, I think something like that should exist. Um, Especially at this point, because like, look, we're all these systems that have been built and that everybody believes in, they're about to annihilate all life on Earth. We're
Mm-hmm.
like, we're on the cusp of that right now. People are like kind of honestly entertaining the idea of a nuclear exchange.
Yep.
Okay, this is stupid because your conflict is fucking stupid. And why? Because of some kind of political or national international disagreement or whatever. What, so you're just gonna like use these things and just kill everybody and kill all life on planet Earth? Because it is possible. um and it's stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I honestly think ninjas are the only answer to beat something like that because like face it, like the everyday person is just the little guy. Like
Mhm.
collectively we are all just the little guy and we on our own can't do anything.
Well,
Anything.
individually we're just a
Right.
little guy, but collectively we are a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah,
And I would say we could go with ninjas or Jedi,
yeah.
right? So you can have both. And
Yeah.
because the philosophy, I think the Jedi philosophy is closer to sort of what I'm sort of seeing here, kind of like a peacekeeping thing,
Mhm.
not necessarily a combative warfaring thing, but kind of a loose
They're
knit.
very similar actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Actually, oh, here's here's a recommended reading for today. I might have recommended this before, but Evolutionary Tactics
Oh
uh,
yeah, yeah.
by Jim Channon. Yeah, so I have a copy here. That it's kind of, it's a little woo, but like what is talked about, it's very much like um, using non-violent means of doing things wherever possible. And there's kind of this sort of, I don't know, it's hard to describe honestly, but it's very different than what most militaries, their doctrine.
Oh
And
yeah.
hmm,
And yeah, uh, and it's important that people understand we're not like shitting on soldiers and stuff like that. Like they are just doing a job
oh
and
no, that's true.
an
It
important job and stuff. But like the fact of the matter is like sometimes their job does terrible, terrible things,
Yeah,
and it would be better overall if we just didn't have those terrible things happening. You know.
yeah, exactly.
Like
But
a country can have a military, just in case, but
mhm.
it shouldn't be like one of the biggest providers of jobs or, like the biggest sources of spending and like just like anything, it's almost as if it's driven by corporations, which means then it's driven by growth and profit and and
Look
and
at
the and the war machine just keeps getting bigger and uglier and
look at the how much money Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and some of these companies are making.
Halliburton. Yeah.
Halliburton, yeah, tons of money. And it's like, well, and there's sort of a revolving door kind of thing going on too, where um, there's an interest for government to do things, to utilize these things to make those profits for these companies. Um, and it's disgusting
Yeah.
because people die, lives are ruined and destroyed, and like precious things are destroyed, old cities and buildings, and like I think the thing that really made me that made me really, really sad was when the U.S. went into Iraq. In the like 2002 or three or whatever, and they destroyed the Museum of Baghdad.
Ouch.
That had like you can't make these again. The artifacts they had were from the dawn of human civilization in there, and it's like, oh yeah, they're bombing things and shooting shit and total disregard for that. And it's like, this conflict is going to be forgotten, but
Yeah.
except what it'll be remembered for is that we, I guess, inadvertently demolished these like absolutely like precious artifacts that you can't replace that stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah, I feel like an organization like that, it would be good to have certain ideals that are at least like kind of reminders for people.
like a
You
code
know,
of ethics, essentially.
yeah, like anything that humans made up is not worth killing for. So borders, religions, money,
Mm-hmm.
like these are all things that we imagined and they don't actually tangibly exist.
Yeah,
So why kill for them,
exactly. I agree. I know. And
And you take all those away and point point to me which war was fought over something that wasn't one of those three things.
yeah, I mean, you can point to certain things like there were defensive actions for certain conflicts, but the offensive action falls into the categories you're talking about.
Exactly.
So it's like, well, there's not even a point in fighting over that. Like it's all made up.
Yeah.
It-
So if there were like a a significant power in the world with no borders, you know, um, and it operated on that philosophy, that means anybody engaged in war would be a target for the ninja army, and they would have to think about that
yeah.
because
Well, maybe anybody who initiates a war, that like starts the war over these things, these
well, yeah,
petty
of course,
disagreements.
like that would be your primary target.
Mhm.
But if, like say Ukraine sees that they're getting the upper hand and then they decide to go do nasty shit to Russia just because, well,
Mhm.
then the ninjas go after Ukraine.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
exactly.
like you wouldn't have any alliances or like what's the word I'm looking for?
Allegiance.
Allegiance. Yeah. No allegiance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what ninjas are all about. Is
Well,
just
and
like,
and that aligns very much with my personal philosophy, being an anarchist. Like I have no allegiance to anything.
mhm.
And I, what I care about is humans, like taking care of my fellow humans on Earth. I don't give a shit about your politics or your government or your religion or whatever. I mean, you do you, right? But just don't do it to me. That's all I care about. And yeah, like what you're kind of talking about, it's like you're absolutely justified in defending your house. If a bunch of ruffians come around and start like attacking your house or whatever, or, burning it down or burning your stuff, yeah, you're justified in stopping that in the moment. But you can't then say, "Oh, okay, well, I did that. Now I'm going to find all the ruffians everywhere, and I'm going to stop them all." Like, okay, that's not justified. That is some kind of vigilante shit which is exactly what the U.S. did after 9/11.
Mhm.
Like, oh, terrorists. It's like, what terrorists? What are you even talking about? I mean, yeah, sure, but like, at some point, you become the terrorist.
Right.
Like,
Well, that's actually kind of a good example of yeah, well, I don't want people to get the wrong idea of like equating what we're talking about with a ninja army to terrorists, but
No.
the decentralized nature of these terror cells or whatever is kind of the exactly how it would probably be built, you know? Like
Well, there's
there
a
is no
difference.
country that they
Mhm.
belong to or whatever, and yet America still went to war with a whole country or a couple countries
Multiple, yeah.
to get these terrorists and looked for any way to justify that.
It was
So,
kind of a moral panic. Well, and so there's a difference. So if you're talking like this ninja militia, essentially, it wouldn't be. I'm sure some people could paint such a force as terrorists, but there's a difference. Terrorists initiate force. Like one day you're sitting here, and then boom, somebody blows up a bomb or releases sarin gas or something for no fucking reason.
mm,
Um, that's a terrorist. They're trying to scare people and motivate people to do something, whatever it might be. Whereas if you're trying to stop people from being hurt, that's not terrorism. That's a
right.
whole different thing. Um, Even if maybe some of the actions or tactics might appear to be similar, like sabotaging things and whatnot, but it's like, well, what we're trying to do here is stop you guys from even fighting.
That's kind of the Israel Hamas thing, isn't it?
Hmm.
Like, isn't that kind of like they're painting these things as like defense against terrorism, but
Oh,
really like they were kind of like, hey, you're like totally squishing us under your thumb and we're tired of it, you know? Like it
yeah, and it's like that's the
it's
thing.
always a question, who is actually initiating it? Like there's always like a popular narrative that makes it to the media, but everybody has a reason for aggressing against somebody. It's just all in how it's framed
Hmm.
about who becomes the bad guy, really. Like,
Well,
but I
that's
mean, some things are clear, more clear than others, but
yes.
um, all I'm saying is everybody has their reasons for doing what they do.
Hmm.
Um, and all of that
Well,
should be like considered.
optics are definitely key to things,
Mhm.
to public perception. And yeah, it's like you're not going to see Western, like in the US or whatever, the media really talk about why Hamas attacked, like the history behind that. They're not going to talk about how the Russia-Ukraine war began, like what led up to that. Really, I mean, maybe
Mm,
some people, but it's not mainstream media. They're not going to talk about it. Um, they're not going to talk about like for the mainstream media. The story begins at 9/11 when it comes to the Middle
yeah,
Eastern conflict. There, it's like, oh yeah, but you don't realize like they feel justified, and it's like it didn't just come out of left field. It
right.
wasn't like they woke up one day and were like, hey, those fucking Americans, we're going to crash planes into their buildings and destroy things because we don't like their freedom. Like that was the narrative that was
Yeah,
pushed for years
they
and
hate our freedoms.
yeah. Like, what? Really? No. Man, this has been going on as long as I've been alive. Like, I remember reading about stuff in like the 70s and shit that we were doing over there, meddling and trying to fuck around. And the CIA, man, oh, this is going to get us on some list, but that they're largely responsible for 9/11. Like if the US was not like getting their fingers in over there for all those decades, 9/11 would have never happened. Um,
Well,
like it's not to say that what the people did was right, that it's a good thing. It's just that,
mm,
hey, there is an actual cause. There's a reason why they did it, not just it didn't come out of the blue. Like,
yeah. Well, when you look back on it, like and I know the narrative was always like they hate our freedoms and stuff, but I think it was actually kind of known that the actual cause for that was like the United States kind of oppressing the rest of the world in a commerce sort of sense, and
Well,
also just in I don't know, just kind of like in a general like being everywhere, like I've mentioned before, like military bases everywhere,
to an
like
to an extent, yeah. I mean, it's a very complex.
I mean, you
Uh,
look at what they targeted, like the World Trade Center and the
yeah.
Pentagon and stuff like that. If they hated our freedoms, wouldn't they just be like bombing things that had something to do with freedom? You
Hmm.
know, like
Yeah.
and the funny part is that the government, our government, the U.S. government was like, they hate our freedoms, so we're going to pass the Patriot Act, take away your freedoms, so that they win,
Yep.
and then we're going to go get them.
Yep. And we're going to go bully a bunch of these countries over there.
Yeah. And then we're going to
It-
leave the Patriot Act in place, and
yeah.
we've all lost our
Well,
freedom,
the,
but
the
we'll go get them.
the
Yeah.
reasons, like the story behind the like that led up to 9/11 is very complex, and it's way beyond the scope of this episode, but it's something you can research and look up and figure out exactly what was going on. And it wasn't like terrorists grew out of the ground and they were plucked and poof, they picked up AKs and started fighting. No, no, no. This we were the ones that planted the seeds, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, especially when you go to like Afghanistan and Russia's involvement over there way back in the day, that conflict, then it goes back even further. Um, but yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff, and this is where it's really, really important when you analyze a situation to look objectively at it and try to piece the facts together, stick all those puzzle pieces together to get that picture of what's going on. Because I can tell you, it's not what the major media organizations are telling you, and it's certainly not what the government is telling you. There's way more to the story than that. And yeah, and that's where having some kind of, well, because here's the thing, you like the best conflict is one where you never have to fire a shot. Um, if we can, or not we, but let's say the ninja militia can or the Jedi militia, whatever you want to call it, if they can see the signs well before something begins and stop it. Like if you see, well, it reminds me like at work, um, in my building, there was a huge fire in the warehouse that destroyed basically the entire warehouse, um, and it was a huge deal. So everything was destroyed. They had to have like a cleanup crew come in because there were batteries that burned and stuff. So there's like lead everywhere, and ooh, it was a mess. But the thing is, initially, one guy early in the morning, he came in and he saw this little fire burning, like a fairly small, containable, manageable fire burning in this spot. And rather than take the fire hose that is on the wall right past it, or grab the fire extinguisher that's on the wall behind him, he ran around and got everybody out of the building instead. And it's like, well, dude, you could have stopped all of it. It would have been a nothing burger if you just grabbed that fire extinguisher and put it out.
Yeah.
There you go, done. Never was a fire, But no, now we're like millions of dollars in reconstruction and stuff like that, simply because somebody decided not to act when it was really small.
Well,
And
or acted in the wrong way.
yeah, well, and my point is, like for instance, if you were to try to stop the Russo-Ukraine conflict right now, or the Israel-Hamas conflict, or any number of the kind of hot things that are happening right now, it's a lot more effort to stop something that's got a lot of momentum behind it than it is
Right.
to stop it before it even begins. It's like prevention is better than what's the saying I'm trying to think of now?
An ounce of prevention is better than a
Is
pound
worth a
of
pound of
cure.
cure. Yeah.
Worth a pound of cure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and stuff like that would be possible with a transparent, non-hierarchical, kind of covert ninja militia where it's built up of ninjas that are just everywhere, like in all sectors of the workforce of different countries all over the world. Like there wouldn't that was the thing with the terrorists. It was not a country, but it was regional enough that they could pass it off as being countries.
Mhm.
But if this ninja militia thing were actually truly worldwide, you really wouldn't be able to like say, okay, this is where the US needs to attack and squash this terrorist threat. Like, and you would also have all these people working in these jobs, and they all would collectively be the intelligence department for that militia, and they could all come to each other and be like, you know what, I've noticed something in the job that I'm working, and I feel like down the line this could become a problem. We should watch this.
Yeah.
And then you have people watching and
Exactly.
and making moves to put out these small fires. And you can attack so many things on so many different fronts at the same time rather than like, yeah, like you said, just like waiting for things to kind of like accumulate and build up into like one giant conflict that, butterfly affects the entire world.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and oh man, I had a bunch of thoughts there. Um, well, like Snowden, for instance, in
Mm.
WikiLeaks,
Yep.
you can see the response because all they did, Assange and Snowden, like all they did was simply share what's going on.
Yeah.
That's it. It's like these are pieces of information that people in the government have at their disposal. They know these things exist. And so it's like it's information that people know, but they don't want other people to know. So they expose that information, bring some light on it, and governments don't like that.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah. The US missed a real prime opportunity to show that they had uh, integrity.
yeah.
And rather than having integrity, they labeled these heroes as traitors.
Hmm.
Like said, "Oh, that's treason." Like, well,
That's a that's a
maybe technically, but that's a loaded word, and
it
and
is, and that's the thing, and this is where there's different kinds of treason, in my
yeah,
opinion. There's the technical legal treason, which it's like, well, yeah, if you just do what Snowden did, I guess it's treason. But it's like, or Chelsea Manning, right? Sharing like very egregious
hmm
acts that like, hey, they wanted to keep this under wraps because it paints the US in a really bad light, and it's stuff we need to know. We should know what's going on when it starts to lean into very bad, in a very bad direction.
hmm
And that's the thing, like with all the stuff that Snowden released, it showed how awful that system was, and how it was totally not anything like what they were saying it was. It was far, far worse than even the conspiracy theorists thought it was. Um, and so, and yeah, and so I would say that's the good kind of treason.
yeah,
That's the heroic treason where you defy the system that's telling you you should not be sharing this information. And you're like, but I know that you guys are doing bad things. This has to come to light. People need to know what's going on because this is not right. It isn't secret because we're trying to do something good and we need it to be secret. No, they know they're doing bad things and they want it to be secret. And
Yeah.
so people who expose that, who essentially bring criminals to light, because they are criminals. I don't care if they're following the letter of the law. They're fucking criminals, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe worse than that. And that needs to come out. The public needs to know about that. And that there's another angle for the ninja militia too, is like simply getting information out. It might be enough to thwart the plans of these bad actors that are in these systems.
And to go back, something you just said reminded me to go back to the idea of like some central tenets to keep in the back of your mind as a member of the ninja militia. What's legal and what's right are seldom the same thing.
You are very correct in that.
So, like, you
agree.
really have to keep those things completely separate in your mind. Is this legal? No. Is it right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that may be the case more often than you're kind of brainwashed into thinking, and the U.S. is
actually,
wait, there's
probably a minute microscopy that we can share about that, because I think I did one quite a while ago.
About which one?
Legality versus.
Oh yeah, that was one of the first ones we put out. I think
season 1. I think
I think that was Minute Microscopy 2.
Yeah.
And that's a very important message, and it's something that I constantly think about. Like all these laws and stuff, and people be like, oh, we can't do that because it's illegal, and it's like, but why?
Yeah.
Like, I can understand why you would normally think some of these things should not be done, but there are plenty of situations where it should be. So, like, why make a law about it?
The thing is, laws, legislation, they're just it's made by just a handful of people, if not just one person, and it isn't like they come from some holy place where there's a bunch of like very wise elders who are saying, this is the way we need to do things. No, it's just some chuckle fuck who's like, yeah, we're going to do that. This is a law now. Like, okay, you haven't even given any logical justification for the law. You just simply said, well, since I've signed this is how you got to be now. Otherwise, we're going to put you in a fucking cage. Like, how can anybody think that that's a good way to run a society?
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. And the thing is, like, I think now, most people probably could realize that society is a global thing. We're a human society, and yes, we're very diverse and regional and stuff. There's little differences here and there, but like, planet Earth is where we live. This is our home, and somebody who lives on the other side of the planet deserves the same rights and respect and whatnot as somebody who lives next door. It doesn't matter what language they speak, what they look like, where they were born, their socioeconomic status or something. Like, it's irrelevant. Man.
And I tell you, like, borders kind of ruined humans.
Yeah.
Well, not kind of. It definitely ruined humans. You look at the animal kingdom, there's territory, sure.
Yeah.
But there's not really borders. There's not like our tribe of tigers is on this side of the river, but that tribe of tigers over there, well, they need to be dealt with, like, so we should go cross the river and attack them in the night. Like, that never happens in the animal kingdom.
No.
This is a human thing.
It might happen that an animal might wander into somebody's territory, another animal's territory, and they might have a little bit of a scuffle over that.
Well, yeah, they usually get spanked and then have to run home,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You don't see them all banding together. Maybe wolves or something, more coordinated animals, but even then, it's a small scale, and the territories fluctuate. They're not set in stone. There's no monument to where the territories begin and end. It's just sort of like, well, it's kind of roughly this area where we've peed on, and you have to keep peeing there to maintain that. Um, it's not like, oh yeah, there's some kind of deed for wolf territory, and they're like, oh yeah, this is our spot, like right here. No, they just pee in places and patrol and do whatever wolves do.
We need to make a movie, like a Ricky Gervais style movie where it's like what would have happened if we just like kept all our animal instincts and you like wake up in the morning and you go outside and get the paper and then you walk over to the edge of your lawn and you just start taking a piss. You're like, hey Herb, yeah, it's marking my territory over here. And like
Just maintaining my property line. Actually, funny thing, I do actually pee around the periphery of my property on the regular at night, of course, so nobody sees, but mostly to keep animals out and stuff.
mm.
Um, I don't know if it's effective or not, but I do it anyway, and it's kind of fun. I don't know. There's something about it, like standing out there, on a relatively busy street and just taking a piss on the corner of my property.
So when I was going through cancer treatments the second time when I had to come and go from Seattle to Tacoma all the time, like I'd get all that chemo and I'd have to pee so bad, like really fast, and my bladder was very weak, and there's always traffic and stuff, so I'd be like stuck in traffic. I'd be like, oh God, I'm like dying here.
Oh,
Finally get home, and I would jump out of the car and I couldn't even wait to get to the door and unlock it and get into the bathroom. I just like dropped trow at the corner of my house and pissed on my house. Like broad daylight, just like
oh man.
pissing on the corner of my house. Cars driving by, whatever.
This is turning into an interesting episode.
Oh yeah, we have another episode about public urination.
Oh yeah. Well, so did I ever tell you the story about dropping my girlfriend off in Seattle at one time where I really had to go to the bathroom and there was traffic?
I think that might have been in that episode. Where was this the homeless camp? Or
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So
All right. Teaser, people, you got to go check out that episode because it's really
I'm
good.
telling the story again. Yeah. So I think there should be something like this, and it would be very threatening to governments. And that's what. And this is something I was going to bring up: is that even talking about something like that could get you labeled. So even just like hypothesizing about it might get you on a list or several lists. But because the thing is, what I see is if something like this did gain traction and there were millions of people who were part of this organization, then it would potentially become something like a new McCarthyist sort of thing, where the governments they'd be totally paranoid and just seeing the like the ninja militia everywhere, and if you even so much as even saying the word ninja is enough to get you in trouble. Like put a bag over your head and haul you off and interrogate you under the light bulb for hours.
That could happen. But like I would hope that I would hope there would be enough people that would hear about that. And I mean, here's the thing: it wouldn't be complicated. It wouldn't be like you'd have to be a card carrying member or something.
No.
Like you could just one day decide, like, you know what, I need to help this organization and just be a part of it. Like
Yeah.
all you have to do is like find one other person and there you're plugged into the network,
Exactly. Well, and if that person happens to be the other guys, and you get taken out, well, that really doesn't impact the network, because there's there's no way to necessarily connect all the dots together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing you'd have to be very careful about is the actual dojos
Mhm.
being infiltrated by governments
True. Well, and that is one
looking for ninjas.
that is a concern in that when you have a system like that that doesn't have any kind of uh, like formal structure, it's pretty easy for bad actors to get into the mix and
Mhm.
infiltrate that system. But that's where, if you're like distributed, well, it doesn't matter. I guess they got to that one cell then, and that's it. Um, and
Yeah. Uh, and I don't know, like that would, since the government is definitely listening, that would be a very stupid idea to go into a dojo of ninjas,
yeah,
real ninjas, whether or not they're part of a ninja militia or not, they're fucking ninjas. And then if you were trying to create some trouble with one of their own, well,
well, that would be like trying to go in armed and rob a gun show.
right.
Like, okay, that is the stupidest thing you could possibly do. Like,
hmm Like you're gonna need a much better plan than that, bros.
mhm. You're gonna need a bigger boat, bitch.
hmm
Oh
Like,
man.
because let me tell you, like the ninja experience as far as like dojos and stuff goes, it's not just martial arts that you're learning. You're learning about uh, utilizing your senses in ways that most people don't.
Well, and that's something that I think is misunderstood about ninjutsu is that people think it's like a hey hiya, like it's all about moves and stuff like that. When that was actually not very common. In fact, the whole idea of a ninja sword is kind of not really correct. Um,
Yeah,
it isn't like there's a formal kit that ninjas would carry. They kind of used whatever. In fact, a lot of times they go in with nothing and utilize whatever they could scavenge
what
in
you
the
get your
environment.
hands on. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's very Bruce Lee in a way. It's like,
Well, yeah. I mean, like we would train with, uh, well, we would train with real swords and shuriken, but
hmm,
also like the fake ones, and just like long sticks in general, because of course, if you don't happen to have a Joe staff with you, something shaped like it will do,
for
and if
sure.
you're, like trained in how that works and how it moves and how it flows around your body, then you're equipped to use whatever you have around you, like that. And that's the important thing. It's not about the tool, it's about seeing tools everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's where I think Krav Maga speaks to the modern era in that regard. Because it's very similar, although there's a lot
Yeah.
of emphasis on disarmament, like how to take a gun out of somebody's hand,
Mm.
like dealing with somebody who has a knife or
Well,
whatever. And I,
it's the same with ninjutsu. I
yeah,
learned a lot of techniques about disarming guns. I think about them often just to kind of keep my brain trained for that.
yeah.
Even though it's not really like an imminent threat here in Germany, but I still do think about it.
I mean, well, if Russia invades, I suppose it could be.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, you carry a spare tire and a gas can. I mean, as long as you've got gas in the car, you're probably fine. But running out of gas does happen sometimes, and without a gas can, or if you have a pop tire, or the tools to be able to do it, and the experience to be able to change it, that's important because you can fall back on that. Whereas people who don't have that experience and knowledge, they're helpless when the unthinkable happens essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I used to train with my friends with a rubber gun, and taking it out of their hand without breaking their finger, because if you have a trigger guard, Yeah, it's bad news for the other person.
And the thing to keep in mind when it comes to training for, disarming somebody with a gun when you yourself don't have a gun or the gun is in your back and your gun is useless. You, even in the training, you become very aware statistically how often you end up dead.
Yeah.
But if you're going to end up dead anyway, you might as well try. So you might as well be trained in what works best, you know?
Exactly. Well, and something like this, going just rewinding a little bit to like the broader picture of like a ninja Jedi militia. Um, Training is important. Sharing information is important,
Mhm.
and I think that's well because we want to empower people. I like this is what I'm all about is empowering people to be independent, to be an army of one. Like
Yeah.
whatever life throws at you, you could find a way to manage it and handle it and overcome it, whatever it is. And maybe you won't. Who knows? It's possible, mind that bus, what bus splat. That could happen. It does happen. But generally,
I said today, what bus? And that ran through my head.
but it's important to be ready for these things to have like a big diverse toolbox so you can handle and manage all kinds of different situations. I mean, I would love nothing more than to make like to create a world of um like just experts that know all, or maybe not no not jack of all trades kind of people
Yeah, yeah.
basically. So you have a little bit of knowledge on a lot of things.
Well,
And
that goes back to what I was saying before, the beginner's mindset. Like you have so many more options available to you for problem solving when you don't become an expert and get this like narrow thinking, you
yeah,
know. And that's such a strength.
it is. Oh,
Like
it
it's
is.
it's it's great to have experts and to be able to rely on them when you need them, but
Sure.
but they tend to be a little bit weaker in any other area.
Well, yeah, their
Or
value lies in the thing they're an expert in and
yeah,
nothing else. Like, so somebody who is like 80 years old, who's been an archaeologist their entire life, they're the person you'd go to find out about archaeological things. You wouldn't go to the guy that just completed college for archaeology.
yeah.
No, because
There
they don't have any
there are
experience.
no Indiana Joneses.
Yeah.
Like
So you'd go, but then you wouldn't go to that same 80-year-old archaeologist and ask them about quantum physics or like auto mechanics or something like some engineering thing. Because no, you'd go to an engineer or whatever,
yeah.
or a physicist or something. And so, but those it academic things like that do have value, and they would have value in something like this because you do need people like gurus you can go to. Like,
Yeah.
man, who? Okay, well, we're all disagreeing about this. We need an elder to basically settle this disagreement. Um, Somebody who has a vast wealth of experience and knowledge about this particular topic. Um, and yeah, oh man, the, I feel like this could be easily many, many, many episodes,
Mhm.
but I think it's something that's really it needs to be a thing. There
Yeah.
needs to be something like that, like a another check to balance things out because we don't have that. It's like, well, if things get crazy, I guess we're fucked, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, that's the one check and balance that was always missing from the beginning, I think. And that's the the check and balance between the citizens and the government. Now, people will always point to voting, but w tell me exactly what good voting does in in a situation that requires like an immediate response.
True, and voting is only as valuable as the ones that are being voted on.
Right.
And you'll find, at least in my observation, I find that like the people who run for office or whatever or propose a piece of legislation, they're not doing it altruistically. They have their own motivations, and they're not intent on benefiting you.
Right.
And generally speaking,
Like
so yeah,
like a true voting situation that really allows for a diversified idea pool. You would see a president winning with 7% of the vote.
yeah.
Like it would be that dilute
Well,
where
and that's
people are like, ah, you know, I like this idea best. I like that idea best. You'd be voting for like 35 different people or something, right?
and you might even have like a tiered
Yeah.
ranked choice voting kind of thing or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, well, first off, I don't think there should be partisan candidates at all. For
No.
one, I think that does a lot more harm than good. But yeah, we have like primaries and stuff where it's, oh yeah, we're gonna whittle down everybody down to one person, and then you've got two shitheads to choose from,
Yep.
unless you want third party voting. But I mean, that hasn't happened in the U.S. in a really, really long time. But I'd much rather see
They
no.
tend to be shit too. Like,
Yeah,
it's, there's
yeah.
there's really no like good options out there anymore, and it's
Well,
just
and that's where having a system that's comprised of the totality of the populace, who's part of this organization, essentially global organization, where it's beyond borders, potentially even beyond the atmosphere. Who knows? Um, so a system like that, well, that levels things out a little bit because now it's not really hyper focused on one particular country or whatever. It's like, oh, all these different people are exchanging ideas and thoughts and trying to figure things out and stuff. It's kind of like how things work on like 4chan or Reddit and stuff, where like some of the I mean, there have actually been cold case crimes that have been solved through Reddit, decades after they closed the case. Like, and that's just, it isn't like a bunch of professional detectives coming together. It's a bunch of people sitting down in their basement at their computer doing a bunch of research and thinking and trying to figure things out. It like you can accomplish almost anything when you get enough minds together.
that's a great example, actually. Yeah, because it's not always just about enough minds either. It's about getting the information out to the right people in the right area at the right time.
Mhm.
You know, like maybe it was solved on Reddit because somebody who was like super close to the case saw it and was like, "Oh, you know what? I have some information that probably no one knows." And like that's what it takes. But
Well, and like they put their information in, and other people are like,
yeah.
"Well, wait a minute, this changes everything." Now, now we're thinking it's this, and then they can like test for that and try to
Mm.
research and look into a different angle that they hadn't considered before. Um, it's awesome, and that's like a relatively small community in essence, where there's like one particular thread talking about, say, like the most mysterious song on the internet, trying to figure out who did that song. It isn't something that
I
is,
think it was ALTAiR.
yeah, yeah, back in the '80s, man. Like, yeah, with my 4-track recorder, we cut a tape, man. And yeah.
I don't remember much of the 80s at all, man.
But it is one of those things that I think if you have diversity of thought and sort of a common goal, and that's going back to sort of your code of ethics idea that like, this is what we're about. These things, we hold these truths to be self-evident, essentially, that these are the core beliefs or whatever the core tenets of this system, and
Right.
we as long as you make everything strive to uphold those, then I think it can be easily justifiable, whatever it is that you do.
Yeah, this was another thought I was having is like uh, the concept of a default state. And what I mean by that is like when it comes to religion, for instance, kind of the default state is atheism. Like everybody is born an atheist because they have no concept of God,
Yeah.
so they can't possibly believe in a God, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Well, it's
so
the same. Okay, we can for those who think that everybody's born religious, let's turn it around and say Santa. When a
yeah,
child is born, they don't know about Santa until you tell them about Santa and say,
right.
oh, Christmas time rolls around. Oh, those presents are from Santa. They would not formulate that concept if you didn't plant that seed.
Yeah. So when it comes to like rights and wrongs, um, kind of the default state tends to be like what is there in a void of any like human culture, so like borders, do
Yeah.
borders exist? Do laws applying to borders make sense? Are they worth following? Well, no, because the default state is no borders,
Yeah.
you know? So, like,
You'd have to be told about those things.
right. Like, the default state in nature should kind of like in a stalemate situation, the default state in nature should kind of be the tiebreaker.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you're in a conflict where it's like, well, is this right or is that right? I think that's kind of like the mindset to take then is like, well, like in the absence of, like a true tiebreaker, just kind of go with that. And
Well,
I think that can guide people mor in a morality sense quite well.
yeah, and I guess there's room for compromise because there's definitely going to be situations where people don't necessarily agree, and there's not necessarily a way to find the truth per se, especially when it comes to personal opinion. Like, oh, is pineapple on pizza a good thing? Well, just go ahead and look that up online, and you'll see some heated debates. Um, well, and in logic, it's like first principles. That kind of thing makes sense. Like that might be the best way to kind of analyze things. Um, it, I don't know. Maybe this is something we can offline grind and endeavor to create like a universal code of ethics for Earthlings.
Hmm.
That's because here's the thing: it's got to be simple. It's got to
Yeah.
be obvious. It can't be wishy-washy or dependent on a particular vernacular or something like that, like the way things are phrased or something. It's got to be almost something you could mathematically um, present. um,
Yeah. And well, and it should be like to the best of our abilities, we should strive to make this be something that is non-corruptible. Like,
yeah.
and I think that the whole idea of like no hierarchy, complete transparency,
Hmm.
um, like kind of going with default state when it comes to morality and ethics and stuff. Like, and I mean, like, even that is probably imperfect because,
Yeah.
like, a default state could be considered starvation. Like, Well, I mean, like by default, you don't have food. You have to go hunt for it, right?
Mhm.
So like like
It's true.
like with anything, you could find a way to twist it.
Well, in that particular case, I'd say, all right, well, sure, somebody can make that argument, but my response is, okay, well, fine. If you have to hunt or forage for food, and food is a necessary thing to sustain your life, and I think we can all agree that life is sacred, that's kind of the origin point of all this,
Yeah.
that it is wrong to impede somebody from doing those things. Like as long as it's not like, oh, they're taking the sustenance away from somebody else, because that's logically arguable there, that is a
Yeah.
wrong thing to do. But impeding somebody without justification from being able to acquire food or water or whatever, that can be seen as wrong.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, there's a lot. It's really hard to avoid interpretation, especially when you're talking language, and that's why I'm saying it has to be something that can be mathematically represented,
Yeah.
where like everybody on planet Earth, we all pretty much math the same way, or maths if you're in the UK. Um, um, we we all math the same way, and so like I think there, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that would look like, but I think it's worthy of creating something like that as like we're gonna cut this in platinum as a
Yeah.
plaque, and it's gonna exist as a standard, a universal standard.
Yeah. I mean, like if it was good enough to like kind of bring some order and justice to ancient Japan, you know, I think it could be translated to the modern day. And
Well, and the difference is the same thing. There were a lot of really good ideas in the formulation of the U.S. that um, there were good ideas, and I think it was a valiant attempt to really vastly improve on the past. And so, well, okay, we have experience now with Japan. We have a long time of experience with the U.S. We're, I think, about 300 years in now. Um, Almost, I guess. And all these different.
almost 250, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, round up.
Yeah, because empires only last about 250 years, and I think we're about 1 year out.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
this is why we need this more. We need a Jedi more than ever, I
Mhm.
guess, or a ninja.
It's time to start putting this together.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I'd brought my lightsaber up. That would have been a good, Uh, yeah, and but we now have a vast catalog of information and experience and all this stuff that we've learned over all this time, and we're able to share all that stuff and learn from it. And I think we can take all that and make something better. Like, and this is the thing, as an engineering kind of mind person, that's all I'm always thinking about. Okay, how can we improve on this? And it doesn't have to be jumping from level 2 to level 10. It could be jumping from level 2 to level 3, right? We just make a small incremental improvement. Like, okay, we can do that. That's something people can swallow. Going from now to Star Trek TNG would totally disrupt the planet.
Right. Well, another Asian philosophy is like to set your goals for like 1% improvement rather
Yeah.
than making these big jumps. And
Mhm.
and you may not have your lightsaber, but I do have my Joe staff at the ready.
Nice. Well, if you can talk for like 40 seconds, I can grab mine.
Well, actually, yeah, like this, I am pretty proud of this particular Joe staff. This was handmade. It's a Brazilian purple heart wood, if I remember that correctly. One of the like top 10 or 15 hardest woods in the world. My my sensei made this for me on the 9-year anniversary of beating cancer because the number nine is very sacred in Japanese culture. So here's a nine Q, and my name in Japanese. And so yeah, this is something I bothered to take with me to Germany, which was not particularly easy to do.
Yeah, like did you do that through like baggage or something?
hmm hmm
Huh.
Oversized baggage, yeah.
Is that like 4 feet or something ish?
This one is, yes. hmm
That's awesome.
Bo staff is 6 feet. Joe staff is 4.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have my replica lightsaber here. Yeah. That's gonna translate, but
I kind of hear it, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I
That's the kind of like values that are worth expounding upon and
Mhm.
and like we kind of live in a world where like there are no values anymore. Like it's all
Yeah.
superficial. It's
It
all about
is.
profit. It's all about popularity and virality.
Well,
And
and it's almost like people have become hyper selfish.
Mhm.
And actually, so I'll go with I'll also add Sealand, because I'm a knight of Sealand. So there's a code of chivalry, which oh Floyd might interrupt. But there's some really good thoughts in here. So I mean, I have it on my wall as a reminder at all times. So there's a few tenets here. Defend the right to freedom and the freedom of others. Be loyal to the Principality of Sealand. Makes sense. Defend the Principality of Sealand against all who oppose it without cessation. Always remain loyal to the order of the knighthood. Protect the weak, old, and infirmed. Carry oneself proudly and with dignity. Be courteous to all. Be humble before others. Demonstrate unyielding courage in the face of adversity. Maintain self control. As I grab a beer here, conduct oneself with integrity regardless of circumstance. Always be willing to counsel a troubled companion. Commit to excellence and seek the highest level of excellence in all aspects of one's life. Remain loyal to one's brothers in arms. Be heard speaking favorably about the order of the knighthood and the principality of Sealand in general. I like the in general. Um, uh, Not in any manner bring shame upon oneself or the order. Um, Always attempt to apply practical knowledge to all situations one faces. Defend freedom of speech for all. Treat all people with fairness, honesty, and compassion, regardless of their station in life, and be charitable to others. And I think that's a damn good message.
Yeah.
That's like that's really good.
So I decided to pull up the 5 Commandments of the Ninja, written by Hatsumi Masaki, the Grand Master, 34th Grand Master of Ninjutsu, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So like in direct line with the old ways. Whenever one is sad, unhappy, sick, wounded, or in despair, one should remember these 5 commandments. 1. Forget your sadness, anger, envy, and hatred. Let them pass like smoke in one breath. Don't give in to such feelings. Number 2. Do not deviate from the path of righteousness. You should live a life worthy of a human being. It is this simple philosophy that has been repeated by sages for many ages. That rhymes.
It does.
In English, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3. Don't hold on to greed, luxury, or your ego. If you learn the martial arts just for your own benefit and always try to be dependent on others just because it's easier, you will be controlled by these three desires, even if you have reached a high rank in the martial arts. These three desires, the greed, luxury, and ego, distort not only martial arts but humanity. When people die, there are two paths to death: joy and sorrow. Joy is meant here in the heavenly sense and not in the pleasure or the past. When one reaches this stage in life, one realizes one's true purpose in life.
Hmm.
Number four, you should accept suffering, sorrow, or hate as it is and see it as a chance from the Almighty for a test. It is the noblest spirit in Ninpo to regard everything as a blessing of nature. When you're trying to get things done, sometimes your goodwill is portrayed as bad by some people who are obsessed with their own selfishness.
Hmm.
And number five, be fully engaged in Budo with both your time and mind, and be deeply focused on Bujutsu with your mind. Read between the lines of the late Takamatsu's story, and you will learn the attitudes and methods to be followed in ninjutsu training. Number five has some like previous knowledge requirements there, I
Yeah.
think. But
No, I mean that is a really good like sentiment right there, and and this is the kind of, I guess this is the picture that we're painting here of kind of what we are looking for.
yeah.
Um, essentially a force for peace, and
Well, I
that's
think that the important thing is that this is kind of driving you toward is having peace with yourself.
yeah,
Because
which is
from
it's
there,
really hard to be in conflict if you're at peace with yourself.
yeah,
That, well, like we were talking about before, that the driving force between wars um, tends to be monetary or material or ego or whatever.
yeah,
And if you don't have any of that stuff, if you're not really worried about any of that stuff, like, okay, yeah, we all need a little bit. Um, but it doesn't have to be to the extreme. And I think that's, well, that's the way to achieve world peace, is to cast off all of those desires and fears, I guess.
yeah,
Um, man, we should. I think we should start something like this.
yeah, definitely. Like I'm feeling like a calling toward doing something big
Yeah.
for for changing the world and you know like it may or may not be able to be kicked off through this show, you know, as a vehicle, but it's definitely um the kindling for it, you
Well,
know.
and maybe it may not come to fruition in our lifetimes,
Yeah,
but nobody else is really endeavoring to start something that, like what we're talking about. And so, yeah, I think it might be worth starting.
yeah.
Whatever the risks too, because there are risks. It's like a
Well,
lot of
this,
people have been imprisoned or disappeared due to their ideology or philosophies
yeah.
that counter the status quo. Um, and
We should go out of our way to post this episode on Rumble
mhm,
and any other sort of fashion. This diaspora that you're talking about
yeah,
perhaps might be a good place to promote it. And
mhm.
I don't know if we have a presence there, probably not, but
Not yet, but we can.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, we have some ideas, maybe we don't necessarily know how to implement everything, and that's where it takes a village. You gotta
exactly.
you gotta bring in people who know stuff about stuff that you don't know about, and I would love everybody to be a jack of all trades, a Renaissance man, essentially, or woman, or whatever, a Renaissance person. Let's say that. Um, it's 2024 after all. Um,
Assigned Renaissance person at birth.
yeah. Well, the thing is, there's a lot of people who want to keep their arcane knowledge to themselves and be the one that knows the things that other people don't know. But that's stupid. We're all better off if everybody knows things and everybody has skills and capabilities in all manners of life. Otherwise, Floyd.
Someone killing your cat?
No, he's down here trying to hop up on the chair, and he's getting pissed off that there's no room. Floyd, come on, settle down, man. Yeah. Oh man, geez, there's so much to consider. But I think it's something. It's high time that a change happens of some sort, and focusing on your little microcosm in your little country or whatever, and all that stuff, and making that like, oh, this is all that I care about, and this is all that matters, and that's problematic. I think.
I wonder if something like this would be worth trying to get a message to Masaki Sensei and see if he would put the word out into the Bujinkan, because it is, albeit like not that many places in the world, but it is spread across the world.
Yeah,
like there's a dojo in Dusseldorf here in Germany.
Yeah.
Like, so I've thought about like making the drive to go practice there. Maybe someday I will. It's been a few years. But
it's one of those things that once you kind of have your toe in the water, so to speak, you can
like
continue to swim.
You can always walk the walk. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely try to keep that like in the back of my head, like, because it is important to me. Like that is something that spoke to me in a time that I really needed it to. But the timing is irrelevant. Like it still makes sense, like it doesn't make sense in just one frame of my life. It makes sense in all of it,
Yeah, I agree. I have a little bit of martial arts experience, but for me, like stoicism, that's one of the things you do have to kind of maintain that and keep it fresh. Otherwise, you do sort of slide back into your old habits. And yeah, oh man. Well, maybe so if we had something established, even a little bit, then that's a thing that could be pointed to. So maybe, yeah, I guess we could get started on that.
I mean, again, this isn't something that is like something that you have to dedicate hours of your daily life to.
No.
Like a job. It's more something that you just carry with you, and if there's a moment that requires action, you act with that in mind, like with that goal or intention.
You do have to maintain that. Well, it's like transcendental meditation. It's it can be a very profound thing to experience, life-changing, honestly, especially for a lot of people. But you got to keep up with it, but it doesn't take a whole lot of time. Even exercise, it's like, hey, if you want to stay fit, you don't need to go for like a 2-hour run every morning or something like that, or go to the gym and lift weights for hours on end and stuff. No, just a little bit here and there. Run for like 30 seconds or something. Like, oh, hey, if there's a flight of stairs, run up the flight of stairs. And that's probably fine. That's enough to keep things maintained.
Right. Well, it's like you're supposed to brush your teeth for 2 minutes, but if you are running low on time, is it better to skip brushing your teeth or brush your teeth for 10 seconds? Well,
Yeah.
10 seconds, of course.
You can get a lot done in 10 seconds with a toothbrush, actually.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, it's better than nothing.
exactly. So
Oh,
people that's that 1% improvement I had
hmm
mentioned earlier. Like people need to keep that in mind. Like set your bar lower. Like it's
Yeah.
not all about being the best and giving 110% every day because that's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, fine. You're working a minimum wage job and you have dreams of being a millionaire. Okay. I mean, it's achievable, but you're not going to just be able to do it in a month. It's going to
Right.
take time. Maybe instead of your 30, $40,000 income, work to make $50,000. Work to make $60,000. Work your way up. Because that's a thing that's an attainable goal. That's
Yeah.
within your and because people the problem is people will have these lofty goals, these expectations of like, oh, I want to be a millionaire or whatever. I don't know why you'd want to be one, but whatever. And so if it doesn't happen, lickety split, whatever plans they have or things they attempt, if it doesn't work out and they're not a millionaire, oh well, now I'm despondent. I'm a loser. And that no, you just set the bar way too high. Um,
Mhm.
so and maybe watched a few too many of these the motivational speakers, all these TikTokers that are like driving around in fucking Lambos and stuff like that. They're like, oh, you just watch my 30-minute thing uh
Yeah.
and you're gonna be a millionaire just like me.
574 simple things you need to do to become a millionaire.
Mhm. Yeah, like that. Don't.
Number one, have rich parents.
Yeah, yeah, or just luck.
Hmm.
Something lucky happens, or you'll actually find that a lot of these people um, are faking it. It's all made up. Like it's
Yeah.
just debt. They're just like oh, I just this Lambo's on loan or whatever, and then the house that they're in that looks all cool. It's just somebody else's house. It's like you know they're renting it for the day, just to film things.
Yeah.
But as it said, comparison is the thief of joy. Don't worry about what other people have and what they've achieved and stuff, because they've achieved their things. You can achieve your things. Doesn't matter. Like, who cares? But all too often, and this is where the way things are going with social media and stuff, it, that is more and more prevalent, and it's no wonder that depression is growing. The people are more and more depressed because they see all these successful people and think, oh my God, I want to be like them. And I'm just nothing because I don't have anything. It's like, you don't know how much you have, actually. You're far better off than you think you are. And that's wow, this has turned into like a counseling session, I guess, for the audience.
Life coaching.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that is part of it too, is breaking free of the shackles of the system that tries to beat you down and tell you that you're nothing and you're just a drone and you got to do the things that we say you got to do and follow all these rules and societal norms and whatnot. Yeah, fuck that shit. Be your own person. Just don't be your own person at the expense of other people, please.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Instead of life coaching, it should be ninja coaching.
I know, or Jedi coaching, because both speak to different kind of sectors of the populace.
Mhm.
Even though there's a lot of, like, on the Venn diagram, they'd be like almost intersected entirely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think with Jedi, it's a little more spiritual,
Yes.
but it's not that there's no spirituality with ninjutsu.
Well, even what you read, there's spirituality in there.
Yeah.
And I can tell that it's not talking about a god. It's talking about like some cosmic something. Um,
Yeah.
or it could be whatever you believe in.
Yeah. I don't know. Like yeah, I feel like there's definitely a calling there. I think there's a reason that like this came to me in a dream, and not just a dream, but like a dream that coalesced into my full conscious like awakenedness,
Mm-hmm.
where I was thinking about this very thing, like, and how to construct such a thing, and what, like what the strength of an existing country's military could stand to gain by adopting some of the um, more relaxed philosophies of ninjutsu, like
Well, so,
rather than, like central authority, go more with right and wrong, you know?
when Shannon wrote Evolutionary Tactics, so he was in the military back in the day, and he wrote that book, and it got noticed and taken seriously by high level military people, um, who were like, huh. In fact, Shannon is credited as basically like crafting the army of one concept, um,
Hmm.
among other things. And so they like really took it seriously because the idea, kind of a lot of the more you read, it's about like self improvement, and then like solving problems without fighting, and because most problems can be solved without fighting. Sometimes a fight is inevitable, but I mean, if you adopt that kind of principle, if that's sort of part of your being, especially if both combatants have this kind of philosophy, the fight will be almost choreographed. Like it's just something you go through the motions. Like, oh yeah, we got to fight, and then it's like, haha, whatever. Oh, that was a good fight. Um, like so, man, this is going deep.
Yeah,
I think we're going to have to come back to this, but we're going to have to start something, I think.
definitely.
Yeah.
And, I would just call upon people to, you know, uh, hold aloft your mighty Joe staff and say, Shiken Haramitsu Daikomyo!
And death will come from the skies.